Okay, so we're continuing the last few Mishnayot of Pirkei Avot, Perek Aleph. So we'll be done with Perek Aleph today. Mishnah Tet Zayin, Yud Zayin, and Yud Chet. Mishnah Tet Zayin said as follows: Rabban Gamliel Omer. Here, this Mishnah does not necessarily continue with the chain of command, in other words, with the transmission from generation to generation, precisely because we're still dealing with the children and grandchildren of Hillel. Later on, it goes back to that. That is the explanation given as to why it just begins with the words Rabban Gamliel Omer, instead of saying he's the next one, he's the one that received it from the past generation, from the past group of rabbis. Nonetheless, he was a great man, and this is what he taught. Aseh lecharav, make yourself a rabbi. Well, that sounds familiar. We saw that already in the very beginning. But this one is a little bit different. As we will see, he says, after make yourself a rabbi, vistalek min hasafek, don't try to have any doubts. Don't try to live a life of doubts. When you have questions, look for an answer. Look for a resolution. And don't get into the habit of taking ma'aser by estimate. I'm going to explain each one of them. Now, he begins with Aseh lecharav because the Aseh lecharav over here will help us with the rest of this, with the rest of the questions or the rest of the doubts that one may have. So this Rav that he's talking about is different, somewhat different than the Rav that was mentioned earlier in another Mishnah, where it says about acquiring a friend and having a rabbi. Over there the Mishnah was speaking more in general terms how important it is for every Jew to have direction. One needs direction, one needs to be able to consult at times, to get chizukim, to be strengthened. It's not necessarily for halakha, but of course for halakha as well. A rabbi is a figurehead. A rabbi is a teacher. A rabbi is something that we should all have, everyone should have, in order to do things properly. He can chastise us, in other words, rebuke us if necessary. He can point the way, and so forth. Here he's talking about more specific, about questions in halakha or questions in emunah, in faith, that sometimes one may have doubts about. Questions come up. He heard something, he read something, he learned something, and he has doubts about it. Who's he going to ask? He should be able to have someone that he respects, that he can always ask, that he will listen to, that can clarify his doubts, that can answer his questions in halakha. This is not only for the average person, this is also true for rabbis. In other words, rabbis themselves, those who are learned, Talmidei Chachamim, also may have occasion to ask. And they should not hesitate to ask, because they don't know everything. And there are complex and difficult questions where they may not have the answer to for them. So therefore they should ask. They should ask a higher authority. That is the significance of Aseh lecharav. One should not always rely on his own understanding, on his own knowledge, because he's not always objective. He does not perhaps understand it as well as somebody who's more experienced than he is. This is also true if someone learns on his own. It's always best to learn with others or to learn in a class, because then between everyone the questions hopefully are resolved, there's more clarity, there's less misunderstandings, less room for error. So if somebody does, for whatever reason, learn on his own, he wants to learn certain things on his own, there may be more of a chance that he may make a mistake, or he may have questions and doubts about something. It's unclear to him. He's learning, he does not fully understand. Ask. Don't be shy to ask somebody who may know. That's why it's important to be able to turn to someone with any question that may arise. Now, when questions do arise, it's very important that they be addressed to a competent rabbi, a competent person who is familiar, who's an expert in that field. Just like with doctors, there are certain things that not all doctors know, right? There are doctors who specialize in a particular area. Doctors are supposed to know general things of the anatomy of the body. That's what they learned in college. That's what they took courses of. So they may know some of the basics, but very fine details about specialties, about certain areas, those are the doctors who deal with that area, who have the experience, who have done perhaps surgery in that area, who have had cases and patients with those kind of issues. So in the same way, we go to them because we want the best. So when you go with a complex question or certain questions that are not ordinary, one should consider going to someone who knows about that particular area, who's able to deal with that question or that issue. Not every rabbi who's a rabbi is familiar with all aspects of halacha. There are halacha in various areas that some specialize in. Some have years of experience in that particular area that others don't. It's very difficult for one individual to be able to be knowledgeable or very familiar. He may be knowledgeable, but to be very, very familiar and fresh in his mind in all areas of the Torah, that is a very, very rare. And even if he is, he may have to review it because he's not dealing with it right now. You can just deal with so much at any given time. So it is always preferable to go to the one who knows about it, who he deals with it, and there's all kinds of things that are complex. In halakha, very, very complex. And you need the experience, you need the knowledge, you need what is called in Hebrew the shimush. For certain areas, you need to have been trained or had training in that particular area in order for one to be able to answer reliably certain questions about the certain halachot. So that's how it's pretty much divided. You have different rabbis who are pretty much specializing in certain areas, others in other areas. And even though one who's knowledgeable in general can answer the basic questions of halakha, or he can look them up, there are situations that are very, very complex that require further investigation. Even by those who are competent, they need to further investigate it. And there are times that even the expert would not render a decision unless he consults with other great rabbis too. Why? Because one of the most difficult and complex and sensitive topics is the topic of agunot. A woman whose husband did not come back home. He disappeared. It could be he died. It could be he just doesn't want to come back home. All kinds of possibilities, especially at war. Maybe he wants to, but he can't. I mean, who knows? He's a prisoner. There's all kinds of possibilities. This woman cannot remarry until she knows for certain what happened to her husband. If he's alive, I mean, she can't. I mean, if she does, chas v'shalom, and she has children with her second husband, the children are mamzerim. Right? It's a big, big sin, and it's a big problem for the kids if more kids come. So it's a very sensitive topic, very difficult topic, agonizing, because you want to help the woman. So if there's some testimony, some indication, something to go by that is reliable, of course, simanim, of course we use it, we look at them. So rabbis have to consider everything. They have to investigate, interrogate, and pretty much determine, can they rely on the testimony or on the evidence that is being presented to them. Maybe yes, maybe not. Maybe it's a lie. Maybe it's not 100% accurate. Maybe he thought he saw him, but it was somebody else that looked like him. Are you sure it was him? Yeah, What did you see? Well, I saw his name, his badge. He was dead. I saw the badge. I saw his uniform. But are you sure it was him? What if it was a couple days after he got killed? Maybe the body decomposed beyond recognition. As you know, depending on the elements, the weather, the condition, the ground, where it is, the body can decompose very quickly or slowly, But it's still, after a little while, it's hard. Today they have DNA, of course, but we don't have the body anymore. That's the problem. So this is a very, very difficult question to do all on your own. So a lot of rabbis would not render a decision, would not put their name unless others agreed with them, or unless others first looked at it. V'istalek min hasafek. When you get yourself a rabbi, what you're doing yourself is a big favor, not only in teaching and halachot, you will have less doubts. What's so good about doubts? What's so good about not having doubts? The rabbis tell us that in simcha ke'atarat hasfekot, there's no greater happiness than if somebody is able to unload or release himself from the doubts. It's not a good thing, it's not healthy to live a life of doubts. Imagine people who are full of doubts about all kinds of questions and they don't ask. It's like the child in the Haggadah, Sheno Yodea Lishol. He's in a very bad position. He doesn't even know who to ask, how to ask. And then what? What a shame, what a loss. Because if he would ask and he would get the right answers to the questions that are disturbing him, his life would be perhaps very, very changed. Do you know how many people have this question on their mind as to what happened in the Holocaust? Where was God? It's bothering them. How could it be that 1 million kids who never sinned died? How could it be that great tzaddikim, righteous people, righteous, not wicked, how come they were swept away by the Holocaust? This is a question that's nagging many people, religious too. And chaval, really, it's such a shame. If you have such a big question that is nagging you, find the answer. And there are those that can at least give some sort of an explanation that should be satisfactory to most people. I'm saying somewhat of an explanation because the exact answer for everything we don't know, only Hashem knows. Right? There are certain things that are nistarot, l'Hashem Elokim, they're hidden, they're concealed from us. It's not possible for the human being to ever know everything, all of us Hashem's cheshbonot. We didn't see his books. We're trying to audit and trying to figure out, hey, it doesn't balance. We want to audit God's books, but God says, I don't give you my books. You can't figure this out. I thought that was an interesting example to use audit. We want to audit, we want to figure things out, but you can't. And even if you are given the books, it's not going to add up. 2 + 2 will not equal 4. Not in Hashem's books. There's all kinds of additional cheshbonot, all kinds of calculations, other lifetimes, gilgulim, reincarnations. Nevertheless, the Torah does tell us partially the answer, or partially a partial explanation, which is satisfactory. Terrible things like that on a national scale, or even on the individual scale, but especially on a national scale, we're talking about 6 million, happens because obviously we were doing something wrong. That's all. Things don't happen like that if the Jewish people are doing everything right. Things like that do happen when things are very wrong. And very wrong not necessarily for just that generation. It could be an accumulation. See, people in today's world, the civilized, so-called civilized world, they don't like to hear the term collective punishment. They don't believe in that. But in Hashem's system of carrying out justice, there is a certain degree of collective punishment. I don't like to use the word punishment because it's not punishment. It's to rectify things. In Hashem's system, rectification needs to be done. Atonement is a rectification. It's all there for in some ways, good for the individual that things are rectified, things are straightened out for him. He was dirty, and now they're cleaning him up. So in this rectification, in the process of the rectification, a lot of people swept. Sometimes in English they say he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. Yes. In a sense, yes. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But in order for him to be swept away, he still has to be a part of something. He's a part of the Jewish people. We're on the same boat. Even though there are a lot of people who got swept away and they didn't do anything wrong themselves, not in this lifetime at least not, being part of the Jewish nation means that there's certain accountability. We're all part of the same family. And the way it works is different than what human beings today are trying to impose or formulate laws that, oh no, you can't do collective punishment. Why should he be guilty if the next door neighbor is the one that caused the problem? As in Israel today, they have the problem with the Arabs. You can only punish him, maybe put him away, but not the whole city. No, it doesn't work like that in Judaism, and especially not in Hashem's system of rectification. When rectification is done, it needs to affect an entire community or an entire people, depending what needs to be rectified. So there are some very difficult, puzzling questions that have led to people having all kinds of doubts, and as a result of that, in the past, under certain pressures and under certain circumstances of people who were depressed or were being persecuted, they, as they say in English, they lost it. They went and converted, or they went crazy, or they, God forbid, committed suicide. That is all as a result of not having the direction, not having the strength in one's faith, not understanding things. And these are things that can be, to an extent, can be understood sufficiently to prevent the suicide, to prevent him from going somewhere else, and so forth. But he continued on living with doubts, and for some reason chose not to investigate it further, to ask the right people. That's why this is so important. Don't live a life of doubts. There are all kinds of questions on people's mind. They don't ask. In Baruch Hashem, I put together a list of the 70 most difficult questions. There are more, maybe, possibly, of the ones that I could think of. And B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully, it will be in print. Hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem should help. But you can hear just about all of them in audio, and many of them are in video. Difficult questions, very, very difficult questions that we did our best in the series that we gave to elaborate on them, what the commentaries say, what the rabbis have said, what are some possible explanations for certain things. Nobody here is ever going to claim that he knows for certain the answer to these difficult questions. But there are quite a few explanations, and these explanations do justice to the question. In other words, they're not just simple explanations. What happened to the dinosaurs according to Judaism? How could it be that the world is only 5,772 years old when scientists, claim it's millions of years old? And the reason why they claim is this, and this, and that. And you know that all these scientific things and questions put a lot of doubts in kids and in adults of the 20th and 21st century because they are exposed to this science. This doubts did not exist 100, 200 years ago, when science was not so strong, in control of the media, of what is being written in the press. And even non-Jewish people believed in God and in creation. So you have more and more doubt as we approach the times of Mashiach, where there's a lot of darkness in the world, where people are more into the impure forces, let's call it, into things that are very, very far from spirituality, and their mind is totally not focused. Can you imagine them? They have doubts. They don't even know they have the doubts. That's how bad they are. The doubts are pushed away on the back burner because they don't want to think about those doubts. But if the doubts are there, they need to be addressed. And the problem is the man has a weakness. Adam karov le'atzmo. The rabbis tell us man is close to himself. He's biased. The average individual is not always completely objective, because that's just the way the nature is. He doesn't want to see his faults. He doesn't want to admit his mistakes so easily. So therefore, since he cannot be very, very objective, he needs to consult with others who may tell him, listen, you're wrong. Your prognosis is wrong. Your analysis is wrong. Your interpretation is not right. Or whatever it is that he's looking into. So that's why it's important to seek the help of another individual who will help him figure out things the right way. Ve'al tarbeh le'aser umadut. What does that have to do with anything? Don't regularly get into the habit of tithing. Tithing is le'aser, taking ma'aser, in an estimated fashion. Don't estimate. Ma'aser needs to be accurate. Ma'aser needs to be 10%, not less, not more. Otherwise, it's not called ma'aser. The ma'aser that we're talking about here, even though according to some commentators, this is only a mashal, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And mashal, in other words, he's using that as a comparison. Ma'aser of the Torah clearly says that we give ma'aser to the Levi, is in the wheat, in the field, the crop. Ma'aser of money maybe is inferred from that. There are commentaries, we do have midrashim, of course, that say it relates to everything, not just to the crop. But it's not clearly said so in the Torah. The Torah doesn't say, give ma'aser from your money. The Torah does tell us to give tzedakah. It doesn't say how much. It tells us to give charity. But when it comes to the matanot for the Kohen, for the Levi, there's somewhat of an amount. Truma, there's no specific amount in the Torah, but the Chachamim tell us how much to give. That goes to the Kohanim. The Maaser goes to the Levi. The Levi would take from his Maaser something called Trumat Maaser, a Truma of his Maaser, and give that to the Kohen. So this is a system, of course, that the Torah put in place to support the Kohanim and the Leviim. Maaser and Terumah, therefore, are significant in the sense that the Torah wants to make sure that everybody gets their share, and if one does not do so, then of course he runs the risk of losing everything he has. Very simple. Now, with Terumah, it's much more critical because Terumah, if you don't take off Terumah and you eat it, the tevel with the Terumah in it, it's a very severe punishment. Whereas Ma'aser, you stole from the Levi. You don't have the same punishment. Nonetheless, it has to be accurate, because if you give less than what you were supposed to the Ma'aser, that is, because Terumah you can give one orange and you've done with it. The Torah doesn't say exactly how much, so even a little bit. So Terumah is easy to give. But Ma'aser, it's 10%. So if you gave less, then you're in trouble because your tevuah is not fixed. It's still, in part of it is not fixed. You didn't give enough. Because before you can eat it, you have to have removed the trumah, you have to remove the maaser, and so forth. And depending on the year, there's maaser sheni, maaser ani. So if you take less, your food is not fixed. It's not ready to be consumed. You cannot eat it the way it is. It's not right. If you give too much, then you may not have a problem, but the Levi has a problem, because now what he has is not completely maaser. It's other stuff too. Basically, it is not a good idea to estimate. But this is not, some commentaries tell us that Rabbi Gamliel here is not really talking about Maaser per se. Because, Maaser was always Maaser. People either took Maaser or did not take Maaser. And obviously it was important that it should be done right. But he's using that as a mashal. In the same way that you don't want to estimate Maaser, because that's not a good thing to do. Don't estimate in your rendering decisions. When it comes to rendering a decision in halakha, don't estimate. Don't hypothesize. Investigate it thoroughly and come up with the right din, with the right halakha. That there can easily be a tendency of some rabbis or some Talmidei Chachamim to just say, well, I don't know, I'm going to be mahmir. Mahmir means to be strict. Or some smart aleck who's going to say, I'm going to just be mekel. It's bizmanazeh medrabanan chutz la'aretz. He can come up with all kinds of excuses of why to be lenient. All of these, whether it's a leniency or being strict, is coming from the fact that he's not investigating the halakha properly. So he's doing something me'omed. He's doing something by estimate. And that's not good. And this is related to safek. Right? That's the continuation, the natural continuation of he's telling us, he's talek min hasafek, but don't do it by estimate. Figure it out. Ask. Look into it. And find out what the halacha is. Obviously, when we don't know after all the investigation, that there are times when we are mahmir, there are times when we are lenient, mekel. But you can't just tell somebody, just be mahmir. You know, there are times when a woman stains. She has what's called a ketem. A stain. It's not the regular time of the month, but there's a stain. Now what? Is this blood? Maybe yes, maybe not. And if it's blood, where did it come from? Maybe it came from ketchup. Maybe it was lipstick. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Maybe she was injured. It's from an injury, a wound. It's not necessarily tameh. You have to look at the size. You have to look at the color. You have to look at the location. And one who, of course, considers everything is able to determine if this makes the woman tame'ah, unclean, like the regular nidah, or not, or she can ignore it. It also depends when she sees it during the month. Is it during the Shiv'ah Nekiyim when she's observing her 7 clean days or not? A lot of things need to be considered here. What was she doing right before she saw it? Was this in the laundry or not in the laundry? There was a lot of things, you know. Do you see, and it makes a difference perhaps if you see it during the day or do you see it at night? Do you see it right away or you see it after a couple of days? A lot of things to consider for the one who's looking at this potential problem. A rabbi can say, you know what? Just be tme'ah. Do you know what that does to her? If a rabbi is strict and tells her just be unclean, separated from her husband for 11 or 12 days, they don't even have children yet. You know what this rabbi just did? He prevented a child from possibly from coming into the world. A tremendous sin is awaiting him. Cheshbon lemala for doing that. Why did you just be mahmir? This perhaps was something that you could be lenient with. It was a bug. There are times bugs cause stains. You know, you should have asked a few more questions and you would have realized that this is not something that you have to be mahmir. But it's easy to be mahmir. Just say tmiyah. You don't have to check. Obviously, he's not going to say tehorah, because then he's taking a chance that she's in fact tmiyah, and then, of course, he's getting her into trouble and her husband into trouble. So he just wants to take the safe side, the easy side. Tmiyah, be unclean by being mahmir, because he doesn't want to investigate. That's no good. Al te'aser. Al tarbe le'aser umadud. Stop this kind of a habit of doing things by estimating, by figuring, maybe. No, look into it. Try to be as accurate as possible. Because you don't want to have doubts. Eliminate them. You can eliminate the doubt by looking further into it, by asking others. Next Mishnah. Shimon beno. Now here he says Shimon. He doesn't say Rabbi Shimon, but this is Rabbi Shimon. And later on, the following Mishnah, he does say Rabban Shimon. So what happened here? So some explain that here it says Shimon because what Rabbi Shimon is saying over here, he said before he became the Nasi. Before he became a great person. He was younger. So they call him Shimon beno. The Shimon, his son, said this while he was younger. So what did he say? Kol yamai gadalti ben hachachamim. I grew up all my life amongst the chachamim. I learned a lot of halachot, a lot of chokhmah, a lot of Torah. But you know what? He says, V'lo matzati laguf tov ela shatika. One of the best things that I found out by living and learning amongst the chachamim is that the best thing for the body is to know when to keep quiet. Shatika, silence. Silence is such a great thing. He's talking about the body, not the neshama here so much. The neshama, of course, there's Torah, there's mitzvot, there's good deeds, and so forth. He's talking about the body, the physical body, olam hazeh, interacting with people. One of the best midot that I learned, that I did not know on my own, obviously, that I had to learn and see. And he saw it, he observed it in the Chachamim, something that helps the guf, helps the person in life so much, is shetika, knowing when to keep quiet. So before we go on to the next things, the next two ideas that it tells us, what's so good about shetika? So there's somebody that said, I don't know exactly where it is mentioned, but it is brought down that Hashem created man with 2 ears and 1 tongue. Why only 1 tongue and 2 ears? Well, if he has 2 ears and only 1 tongue, perhaps Hashem created him in such a way that there's more reason for him to hear than to talk. In other words, he should tend to put more of an emphasis and more effort on hearing and less so on talking. Spend more time hearing and less so talking. And that is what the rabbis tell us, milah besela, and I think mashtuka b'shtayim. In other words, the rabbis also said pretty much the same idea. A milah, a word is worth a lot. I mean, words can accomplish a lot of good. A milah is worth a selah, but silence is worth 2 selayim. No? Speech is silver and silence is golden. It's gold. In other words, so silence has a lot more worth than the speech. Why is that? As the commentators explain, because with more and more speech, there is a tendency, or there is a greater chance that that speech, that conversation would lead to sin, to all kinds of forbidden speech. That's why. As the Pasuk in Mishlei says, "Berov devarim lo yachtal pesha, v'chosech sefatav maskil." Berov devarim means with an increase in words, it's almost impossible to prevent pesha, that there was something bad or negative will come out of that speech. The more and more and more and more talk, the chances are something wrong or negative will be said, something that is not right in kosher. V'chosech sefatav maskil, one who holds himself back, holds back his lips, controls his speech, he's smart. Another pasuk says, even a fool, when he keeps his mouth shut, everybody thinks he's smart. Just let him open up his mouth, then begin. Oh wow, this guy. Once a person begins to talk, then they know who he is, he or she. So even when a fool keeps his mouth shut, right? People may have the impression that this guy is a very, very smart person. After all, he's dressed nice, like many of the senators and congressmen. Just wait till they open their mouth and say all those things they say. Oh wow, this guy got elected? How do you do that? Yeah, you have all kinds of people like that, elected. Not only elected, but prime ministers and head of states. But it's all mishamayim, of course. Anyway, and the problem, of course, with the speech is that the more a person talks, the less control he has, and it's very easy when talking a lot that things that are not proper will be said. The commentaries tell us that over here, Lo matzati laguf tov ela shtika, he's also referring to an individual who was insulted. Somebody embarrassed him and insulted him, and he keeps his mouth shut and doesn't answer back. He swallows his pride. That takes tremendous gvura, tremendous strength. Nevertheless, that's the right thing to do, if possible, depending, of course, on the circumstances. Usually to not answer back, not to stoop to that level, and definitely not yell or curse, but to accept it. Shetika, even under these kind of difficult circumstances where a person is being insulted, it takes a lot of strength. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very difficult. But that will be, of course, to his credit if he ever does control himself, even during these kind of difficult situations. That's the right thing to do. In other words, that is the best thing to do. The Chida brings down the Ramak. The Ramak was Rabbi Moshe Cordovero during the time of the Ariya Kadosh, big Kabbalists. He says something fascinating according to the Kabbalah. He says that the best instrument to atone for sins and to refine the nefesh, the best instrument to accomplish that is a person who's able to hear his insult, keep quiet, and to forgive. He says, this is a powerful instrument for wiping away his sins, for refining his nefesh. In other words, this is a very, it is, I mean, but he expounds on that even more, how much it does for his nefesh, for his neshama, if he was tested, challenged in such a situation, he should know that this is min hashamayim, and if he was able to take it well, the greatest machshir, he says, the greatest instrument that can accomplish so much. That is why, based on this, I believe, the Mishnah Berurah, Chafetz Chaim Zecher Tzedek Livracha, says in Ilchot Ta'anit, there is halachot on how to fast a personal fast. Let's say you want to accept a personal fast. You had a terrible nightmare, and you're told that this nightmare means something very, very bad. One of the ways to cancel a bad dream is to take upon yourself a certain fast, or to give tzedakah, right? There's all kinds of ways. If it's really a really bad dream, the majority of bad dreams are not bad dreams. Because a person can see what he thinks is a bad dream, in reality it means something good. You see a snake, is that bad or good?
Good.
That's right. But it depends if you killed it or not. If you killed it, it's not good. You're killing your parnasah. What? Yeah, some dreams, it's the opposite of what you think. Even though with that dream there's different opinions. I'll just give you an example. Okay? What if you see an elephant? What if you see a horse? What color? What if it's a white or black horse? There's all kinds, but these are not frightening dreams. The frightening dreams are usually because of things that you read, memories of the past, all kinds of things. Frightening dreams are usually not real. A real dream has a message, it's very brief, and it's symbolic. A tooth falling is the traditional bad dream, or teeth falling, depending which teeth, depending if you saw them loose or they actually fell. You see what I mean? It all depends on the details, but most people don't have these kind of dreams. But there are dreams that appear to be bad, and that is what we need to, and they need to ask. And if they don't have anybody to ask, then they either fast or they give tzedakah, and that possibly can cancel the decree. Because after all, why did they see the dream? Because they're letting him know before. So if he does teshuvah, or if he does something to cancel the dream, he may succeed. Otherwise, why would they tell him if it's going to come for sure? You see what I mean? Everybody sees a decree before it comes because they give him a chance to cancel it. Most of the time. There are things you can't cancel. You know, unfortunately, those were there is. I think my grandfather told my father that one of his rabbis, his teacher, the famous Rabbi Ostrovce, fasted for 40 years. He ate a little bit at night, of course. He fasted for 40 years. He became so skinny. And this we're talking about he passed away in the late 20s. So imagine, he was fasting from the late 1880s or whatever, and nobody knew why, but it's very possible, this was a big tzaddik, that the reason he fasted was because he saw the Holocaust coming. You know, he had many, many dreams that were bothering him. What would they have to do with during that time? World War I, World War II, or maybe, who knows? Maybe about Mashiach too, and he was trying to cancel all the terrible decrees against the Jewish people. I mean, this was terrible pending decrees. And unfortunately they came. So it could be that was one of the reasons why he was fasting.
But not on Shabbat.
Not on Shabbat, no. Sometimes people do fast on Shabbat if it's a very, very bad dream. But that's an exception. Yeah?
Also practicing not talking at all for days or...
Right, that's what I'm going to say. So the Mishnah Berurah says, instead of fasting, I have a better solution for you. To make a ta'anit dibur. A ta'anit that a whole day you don't talk. Except for tefillah, of course. A whole day you don't talk. He says that ta'anit, the ta'anit dibur, is more effective, it's better than a real ta'anit of food. Why? Because from a ta'anit dibur, your body will not become weak. You will not hurt yourself. Not your neshama, not your guf. No hurt will befall you from a ta'anit dibur. You can eat normally. A ta'anit that you don't eat could really ruin your day. Not everybody can handle it, too. So I advise you, the Chafetz Chaim tells us this. Take upon yourself a ta'anit dibur. So ever since he wrote that, I believe ta'anit dibur has become more and more common knowledge. People have done that. It saves them from all kinds of ills, including lashon hara. So ta'anit dibur is definitely a very powerful, especially based on what we just learned, that if one controls his dibur, especially if they're insulting him, we can see the value of keeping quiet. And of course, we have the famous pasuk, "Hamavet v'chaim biyad halashon." Life and death hang on the tongue. What does that mean? The tongue is capable of killing somebody else, and the tongue, of course, can bring death to the person who said the wrong thing, the bad thing. He's ruining his own life too as a result of saying the wrong thing, or a chaim. In other words, life. In other words, a good life. You want to live a long life, you want to have a good life, watch your tongue. The Pasuk says, in other words, the tongue is the key to what kind of a life a person will have. Either he will have a life or he will have the mavet. Now, this is on the simple level, the physical level here down in this world. But on the spiritual level, a chayiv mavet biyad halashon takes on a completely different dimension. It's brought down in Sefer Hasidim that there's a certain amount of words that every human being is destined to speak. Mishamayim, this man will speak 400 million words. I just picked a number. Okay. So if he's very talkative, divrei chol, secular words, he might leave early this world because he's done with his 400 million. Who mekatzer et yamav, he's shortening his life. If you talk too much, so amavet v'chaim biyad halashon. In other words, you're determining. You talk too much, you may go early. So be careful. But that's not with divrei kodesh. With halacha, with Torah, with chumash, Kabbalah, whatever you learn. If it's kodesh, that is no limit. On the contrary, the Kabbalah says with every good word that you say in tefillah and in limud, you create a malach, a good angel. And with bad words, chas shalom, the words are destructive of the olamot ha'elyonim, of the upper worlds. Bad words, and especially chas shalom, curses and all these things, they're not only damaging here, they're damaging up there too. A person can destroy a lot of what he has created, a lot of what he had formed. It does tremendous damage. We don't even realize how much damage it does. Because words are powerful. The power of speech is something that only we have, not the animals. So we have to watch over it. And if we misuse it, it causes a lot of harm, not only here, up there too. When a person does say words of Torah, the rabbis encourage and advise that we raise our voice a little bit so that we remember better what we're saying. Whether it's in the prayer, that it should be stronger, except in the Amidah. Right? See. And in learning Torah, when you're learning Torah, read it out loud. You won't fall asleep. You'll remember it. You retain the learning a lot better. All right. So after telling us how important or how valuable, I should say, shetika is, he tells us, hey, don't forget, v'lo hamidrash hu eikar el ha'maaseh. Learning is very important, but that's not what matters the most. It's the maaseh. You have to implement what you've learned. Yes, this is true, this is nice, I agree. Go ahead and implement it. You learned it? Great. Now implement it. Lo ha-midrash hu ha'ikar. The learning is not what this world is all about. It's about ma'asim. As the Kabbalah says, this world is called olam ha'asiyah, the world of action. Even though everything is pretty much like a dream, it's all a big dream, a long dream, But it's a world where we actually are expected to act, to perform. This is where Judaism is so different than other religions. Just believe, they tell you. The Christians tell you, just believe. You believe, you're saved. No. Belief is important, but that's not enough. This is olam asiyah. This is a world where we have to perform. Actions matter more than anything else. Obviously, if a person doesn't believe, then he's not going to act. That is why the rabbis tell us something very important. Gadol ha-Talmud shemevi lidei maaseh. Talmud, learning is important. You know why it's important? Because it leads one to maaseh, to deeds. Hopefully. If you're not going to learn, how are you going to know what to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? So since performance of deeds is so important, one has to learn. The learning will tell him what to do, how to do it, will motivate him to do it. Yes?
Is it true, Rabbi, that even if a person doesn't believe, that he acts, he's still Yosef? That belief is not necessary in the equation. Action is more the principal ingredient there than...
Well, right. To perform good deeds
it doesn't even have to
is significant. No, he needs to believe, but obviously they will judge him for that if he did not believe. Because belief in God, for example, is one of the tenets of our faith, one of the principles. There are people who deny it. Chaz v'shalom. If a person denies it,
Not that he doesn't deny it.
He's not just not. If he's not so much into it, let's take a person who grew up in Siberia, a Russian guy, and did not know so much about God. Right? It's not his fault. He's doing a lot of good deeds. He's helping people. He's charitable, even without having learned Torah. He's a good person. He's going to get credit for all of that. But he does not have the ticket to Olam Haba yet. You see, he's missing a lot. Because he did not believe, he did not learn, he did not know that to put on tefillin, to put up a mezuzah on his door, how to keep Shabbat. So with the lack of belief, there will be a lack of learning. With the lack of learning, there will have to be a lack of performance of certain deeds. So he will be lacking something automatically. But in theory, you're right. In theory, if a person was not so much into the emunah, he wasn't sure what God is exactly. He wasn't sure about Yetziat Mitzrayim. But he believed because they told him so. It wasn't so much in his heart. Obviously, they're not going to punish him for that so much because he had doubts, perhaps he didn't have direction. But he did everything else okay. He did it because he was told to do it. Yeah. But usually when a person does not believe at all, not that he denies it, he just doesn't, he's an agnostic, right? Then he will be missing out on the performance of many, many mitzvot anyway. So the purpose of creation is not chokhmah. The purpose of creation is kiyum ha-mitzvot u'va'amasim. It's the performance of the mitzvot and good deeds. So if the chokhmah leads to that, great. But the chokhmah by itself is not enough. It's not something. The world was not created for us just to become knowledgeable. Hashem wants us to perform. He brought us here, so we do. People, Baruch Hashem, build skyscrapers. The rabbis tell us a very interesting thing. If it would not be for the meshugaim, the world would be not built up. There's a lot of meshugaim, the rabbis tell us, in the world. Crazy people. Skyscrapers, apartment buildings. A guy leaves after a couple of years. Why is he putting so much effort to make just a few dollars? Because people are being driven. They have this shigaon. Yeah, make money, sell. Yeah, bigger building, skyscraper Manhattan. People are being driven for all kinds of reasons. Kavod maybe, investment, who knows? 1030 exchange in Texas, right? All kinds of reasons. This is shigaon. But Hashem says, because of the rabbi is saying, because of the shigaon, the world is built up. We have Hong Kongs, right? We Manhattan. We have all these downtowns, right? Shigaon. But that's not the tachlit. The tachlit of the Bria is the mitzvot and the ma'asim. This is the ikar. And the learning leads to that. Anyway, the reason why he tells us lo midrash o ikar la ma'aseh is not only to remind us that the ikar is the ma'aseh, but also it is not proper for somebody to be a hypocrite Na'eh doresh v'lo na'eh mekayem, as they say in Hebrew. He talks beautifully, he preaches, but he doesn't practice what he preaches. Na'eh doresh v'lo na'eh mekayem. He says it very nicely, talks about it all the time, but he's not mekayem what he says. He therefore will never be effective in teaching others. He should not be a teacher if he doesn't believe in what he's teaching. What he's communicating will not be received. Those words will not be receptive. Whether it's musar that he's giving others, whether it's ben adam lechavero, between man and man, he says, do this, be like that. Sir, fix yourself first. Don't tell others to go to shul if you don't go to shul. A person will not be effective as a teacher or as a rebuker, right? One has to, as they say in various languages, practice what you are preaching. So that's what he's saying. The main thing is the ma'aseh. If you talk and learn about it, you don't do it, what are you accomplishing? And the last statement he makes here is v'chol ha'marbeh devarim mevi chet. Whoever talks too much brings about chet, brings about sin. Sin? Yeah. Where do we see the first and best example of this? From Chava. Chava has a conversation with the Nachash, with the serpent, about eating from the fruit, and she said, yeah, God said not to touch the tree. Oh, he did? So the Nachash says, try it. You see, nothing's going to happen. He never told her not to touch it. He just said not to eat from it. But she added the words, not to touch it. The Nachash says, go ahead and try it. I dare you, see, nothing will happen. And she touched it, nothing happened. You see? You can do anything you want. Don't worry about what God said. So this led to sin. Marbeh devarim. Right? The Chava said too many words. It led to sin. So too much talk about things that are not that important, of course, have always that risk that it would lead to exaggeration, to sheker, to lashon hara, to all kinds of sins. Now, the rabbis tell us, even if you praise someone, you talk nice about your host, you were just there, don't talk too nicely or too much about him. Because if you praise him too much, the praise will lead, chaz v'shalom, to lashon hara or curse. Because let's say you say, you know what, I was just invited to this man's home, I spent there a whole week, he treated me like family, everything was great. And you continue praising him, this was good, he's a then somebody overhears your conversation, yeah, but he's a dishonest person. I mean, I've done business with him. Wow, you just heard lashon hara. You just asked for it. Or guy might say, the guy is a crook. Or he might say he's a terrible husband. Or he might say something terrible that he did to someone else. As a result, you started off with good, and it ended up with bad. So the rabbis warn us. It's actually a pasuk about it. Be careful not to overpraise, to overdo it, to talk too much good about your friend, because from that too much good, some bad will come out. So even from too much good, look at what the potential of diburim, too much talking, can lead to. Anyway, the rabbis tells you the Hasidic rabbis tell us that you can learn something from everything in creation. So let's see. I saw somebody once write from a train. What do we learn from a train? That if you're late by 1 minute, you can miss your whole trip. Same thing is true with a plane. But with a plane, even if you're a few minutes early, but you're not early enough, they don't let you in. So how much 1 minute can make a difference? From a telegraph, we learn that every word they charge you for. In those days that they had telegraphs, a lot of people don't know what telegraphs are today. That for every word they used to charge you. So for every word you're being charged. And from a telephone we learn that whatever is being said here is heard over there and over there. In thinking about this telegraph mashal, I saw an article recently about how some people, after going on a long trip overseas, they came home and they found that their cell bill was $10,000. How could that be? They didn't realize that they had roaming charges. So what? They didn't make any conversations. The problem was they took their PC with them, and the PC is automated sometimes to do downloads and updates. and that's tremendous amount of data coming wireless. So they had a bill, thousands of dollars that they didn't even realize they were being charged because of the roaming. You see how expensive it can get for somebody who just talked and talked and talked and talked and didn't realize that the content of what he spoke about is going to be very, very expensive. A lot of words usually can easily lead to lashon hara. Very, very easily. Lashon hara is one of the problems that with too much talk. But a person also has to be very careful with exaggeration and with making promises or nedarim or aftachot. Either way, because if he doesn't keep it, it's a big sin. So be careful with exaggerations. Exaggerations is sheker. Aftachot, making a promise to someone, can be considered a neder. That's all talk. And that can all be a source of trouble. Last Mishnah. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omed, the world stands on three things. That's one version. There's another version that says Kayam. And that's the more I think that's the more accepted version. Because of the following three things, the world continues to survive, to maintain itself. The reason why this nusach I think is the more correct one, because this is a very similar, it appears to be similar to a Mishnah in the very beginning of Pirkei that says Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omed, the world stands on three things: Ala Torah, Avot, and Gemilut Chasadim. This Mishnah is different. He will tell us that because of three things, the world continues to survive, whereas that Mishnah was for the purpose, for three things that Hashem created the world. You better have these three pillars on which the world stands, otherwise there's no purpose for the world. Purpose, tachlit. Here he's telling us, you want this world to function properly, you need following three things. Aladin, v'la emet, v'la shalom. You need to have justice, courts, judges, police, right? Ala emet, you have to have truth and honesty. But also you have to have peace and harmony. If you don't have any of these three, you have war, you have problems, you have politics, you have corruption. Terrible. Many, many countries have jails that are full, packed. I mean, what's going on? Obviously, there's no shalom, there's no emet, there's no deen. There's so many wars, there's so many problems, and mahloket. Because there's a lack of din and emet and shalom. So he says, and because of that, whenever there's a lack of any one of these three, kol sheken, if all three, the world falls apart. Yeah, all kinds of problems occur. Min Hashemayim too, because Hashem is upset. As the pasuk says, emet u'mishpat shalom shiftu b'sha'arechem. As the pasuk in Zechariah Navi says, that you should have truth, pursue truth and justice and peace amongst your gates. In other words, wherever you live. In other words, this is something that you should pursue, this is something that you should want, this is something that you should emphasize. Now, all these three are important, but let's talk about just quickly about each one of them. Din, emet, and shalom. Emet, as you know, is a very, very important midah. Not only in this world, to be truthful, as jewelers, they just shake hands, they barely write any contract. I took from you a diamond, shalom uvracha, or mazal, whatever. It's trust. Trust, that's all it is. You still have to be careful, because in today's world, there's a lot of bankruptcies. But there's trust. But emet, if a person is truthful upstairs, they value that a lot. A person who speaks only the truth. As the pasuk says, one of the ones that Hashem loves, that Hashem holds close to him, near him, is dover emet bilvavo, that he speaks truth in his heart. What does in his heart mean? How do you speak truth in your heart? So there's a famous example of Rav Safra. Rav Safra was a merchant. He had a store, but sometimes it's slow, so he used to pray, say Tehillim, learn, whenever there was no customers. One day he was busy praying, and a non-Jewish customer came to him and says, I'd like to buy this. How much is it? I'll give you $10 for it. The rabbi is praying. He's not answering. I guess he's not happy with my price. I'll give you 20. No answer. All right, I'll give you 30. Come on. No answer. By the time he said 30, Rabbi Safra finished his prayer. Says here, you can have it for 10. That was the original price that I intended to sell it to you. Even though he could have taken advantage of this person who did not know that he was praying and tells, yes, I'll take 30. He was dover emet bilevavo, in his heart. He was completely honest and truthful. He was not going to lie and take advantage. Or some people take advantage, cheat all the time. Unfortunately, when it comes to money, people worship it so much that they're willing to do anything to make a few extra bucks. Dover emet bilevavo, in his heart, he really meant it. Emet is a very powerful midah that it helps people do teshuvah. A person who's really sincere, who's really truthful, it will bring him to teshuvah. Not only will it bring him to teshuvah, it will preserve his teshuvah. There's a famous story with a murderer. There used to be a guy who just killed people. Whenever he was upset, he would kill them. One day he decided to do teshuvah. But he was afraid that he may go back to his bad ways because he had this tendency that this is not the way he would get even with people. So, Rabbi, can you give me a remedy to my problem? How can I prevent it, that it shouldn't come back? I want to do teshuvah completely. I ask for atonement, I give tzedakah, I do everything you tell me. But how do I make sure that it won't happen again? He says, just always say the truth. He says, that's it? Yes, take upon yourself that no matter what happens, no matter what it is, you're never going to lie, you're always going to say the truth. Okay. One day he got very, very upset at his neighbor. He took out the knife. And he went to the street. He went to kill his neighbor. So somebody saw him in the street. He said, Yanko, where are you going? He has to say the truth. I'm going to kill my neighbor. He went a little bit further. Somebody else said, what are you doing with the knife? Got to say the truth. I'm going to kill Yanko. I'm going to kill whatever, the neighbor. So say, wait a minute. Now he caught himself. There's 2 witnesses who now saw me what I'm about to do. So he went back home. Right? He said, because he said the truth stopped him from carrying out his plans. So midat haemet is a very powerful midah that of course is not only looked upon great b'shamayim, in this world too. It helps a person a lot. The goal here of this Mishnah is as follows. The goal in life, the goal of Am Yisrael, actually not only of Am Yisrael, of anyone, has to be shalom. Shalom is a goal. Shalom not only with yourself, shalom with others, to make shalom amongst people, to avoid machloket at all costs. Shalom is the big, big word here. So if shalom is a goal, how do you achieve shalom? You achieve shalom through din and emet. What does din and emet have to do with shalom? You have to pursue justice be'emet. If you pursue justice with truth, in other words, to find out the truth, to discover the truth, to investigate the truth, and your tachlit is for what purpose? To bring shalom. Then everything will work. They're all connected. In other words, you're doing din, emet, to achieve shalom. So if you want to achieve shalom, hopefully you will realize that the way to achieve shalom is through din emet, not crooked ways. Through crooked things you don't achieve shalom. So if you use the din and the emet, that's the way you achieve the goal called shalom. These 3 are also related to the avodah, Torah, avodah, and gemilut chasadim that we mentioned before. Here that it's telling us, you know the Torah that we spoke about? That Torah has to be Torah emet, not fake. Remember the avodah that we spoke about? The world stands in the service of Hashem. That better be done with din, with halakha. That better be done correctly, right? Torah, avodah has to be kedatu kedin. It has to be done sincerely. It should also be done be'emet, right? And gemilut chasadim, that has to be for what purpose? So that you get sechar, so that you look nice? No, because you want shalom. You want everybody to be in peace. You want everybody to be happy, not only yourself. So your gemilut chasadim is for the ultimate purpose, for the real tachlit, to help others, that everybody else should also have a good life. That is the real shalom. Not only that you want it for yourself, you want it for others too. All of this is, of course, very, very special, very powerful, because this is what leads to a normal, functioning, healthy world. Unfortunately, the reality is that we haven't had this completely. Why? Because human beings are the way they are. And that is why we're praying and hoping that B'ezrat Hashem, Hashem should send Mashiach soon, and he's coming any day now, because together with Mashiach will come Eliyahu Navi, that will be the one that's going to give us the good news of the Geulah, and together with Mashiach, who will complete the redemption, then we will have the fulfillment of the pasuk that Hashem oz lamo yiten, Hashem yiftamo v'shalom. That ultimately Hashem, with the bringing of the Geulah, will bring about the final shalom. Thank you.
Amen.